Realme phones are known to look flashy, and the Realme 6 Pro is one of the flashiest to come out yet. Just note that for now, the phone has yet to be announced globally. Like many other mid-rangers, this one is built of plastic. It doesn't feel cheap though, and there's even some waterproofing in the design, even though there is no official IP rating. The design is quite breathtaking, with a neon zigzag effect that changes color depending on how you look at it. It gives me an 80s arcade sort of vibe. On the front is a 6.6-inch IPS LCD screen with a 1080p resolution. You'll notice the wide cutout at the top for the dual selfie cam. The newest trend as far as smartphone screens go is having a high refresh rate, and this is featured on the Realme 6 Pro's LCD. It refreshes at 90Hz, and this means moving elements will appear smoother to the eye. This screen looks sharp at about 400 ppi, and colors can be relatively accurate if you tweak them in settings. Contrast is just okay though, and this screen isn't very bright. We measured a maximum of around 420 nits, and that's not a whole lot for an LCD. For audio, the Realme 6 Pro has a single bottom firing speaker. Loudness here is just average, but compared to the regular Realme 6, the Pro does have a richer sound quality. The phone does have a 3.5mm jack too, if you want to plug in a standard pair of headphones. You have either 64 or 128 gigs of storage on board the Realme 6 Pro. This is expandable too via microSD. And the Realme 6 Pro has a side-mounted fingerprint reader which is built into the power button. It's super responsive. Just a light touch is enough to wake up and unlock the phone. The Realme 6 series phones are among the first devices to include the newest Realme UI over Android 10. It's a change from Oppo's ColorOS that feels much closer to stock Android. The menus, notification shade, and app drawer all feel straightforward and clutter-free. Navigation is a little different from regular Android though. If you're using gestures, swiping from the sides still goes back, but swiping and holding from the sides will quickly switch between your two most recent apps. One of the main differences between this model and the regular Realme 6 is the chipset. Rather than a MediaTek one, this model has a new Qualcomm Snapdragon 720G. However, even though many people are fans of Snapdragon, the Pro model doesn't show a significant advantage over the vanilla one in either CPU or GPU tests. With that said though, performance is great here for a mid-range device. Everything runs smoothly, and we didn't have any problems with thermal throttling even after heavy use. The Realme 6 Pro is powered by a 4300 mAh battery, the same capacity as the Realme 6. Battery life here is just as excellent. The Pro scored an endurance rating of 107 hours in our proprietary battery tests. On top of that, charging speed is great too. The phone comes bundled with a 30-watt VOOC charger, and with it we were able to charge from 0 to 68% in half an hour. The Realme 6 Pro has a quad camera setup, impressive for a mid-ranger. There's a 64-megapixel quad Bayer main cam, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide-angle cam, a 12-megapixel telephoto cam, and a 2-megapixel macro cam. In good light, 12-megapixel photos from the main camera are very good in quality, with pretty low noise and plenty of detail. We prefer these photos over the ones from the Realme 6. You get more detail here, wider dynamic range, and livelier colors. You can shoot with the main camera's nominal 64-megapixel resolution. This can result in some extra detail in the right conditions, but there is also more noise. Portraits are taken with the main camera, and are great in terms of subject separation. There are occasional mistakes with messier hair, but that's to be expected. Shots from the ultra-wide-angle cam are nice. There's good detail and wide dynamic range, but there's some visible noise, as well as some purple fringing here and there. The 6 Pro is one of the few Realme phones with a telephoto camera, and at the 2x native zoom we get some detailed, yet slightly noisy images. There's also a toggle for 5x digital zoom, and these come out okay if you're not looking too closely. The dedicated macro camera doesn't take great photos, and seems more like an excuse to bump up the camera count. There's plenty of noise, limited dynamic range, low detail, and dull colors. In low light, the main camera performs pretty well, better than the non-Pro anyway. There's nicer detail and colors are better preserved, and dynamic range is wider. Night mode brings a boost in the shadows and improves highlight retention. You do lose out a bit on sharpness though. If you shoot with the ultra-wide cam at night, the photos are usable, but not good. You have okay detail and colors, but the exposure is dark. Turning on night mode here offers some improvements in the dynamic range, but it's still just a barely usable photo. You can shoot with the telephoto cam in low light, and performance is alright. The zoom cam does have some issues focusing in low light, so you may need to take some backup shots, but the results are better than what you can get from the ultra-wide. You can use night mode here as well, and it gives you a brighter looking exposure, but the image is overall softer. The Realme 6 Pro has a dual selfie setup, consisting of a 16 megapixel main cam and an 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle camera. Photos from the main selfie cam come out really nice in well-lit scenes. The HDR processing does sometimes have an effect on finer detail, but it's not so bad. Besides the field of view, the ultra-wide selfie cam shots have an entirely different look. You get higher contrast, narrower dynamic range, and a different color rendition. We wish it was more consistent between the two cameras. Let's move on to video recording. You can shoot in up to 4K at 30 FPS with the main cam, and these videos have good detail and saturated colors and wide dynamic range. But the sharpening is a bit too much, and the video is overall a bit grainy. The telephoto cam can also shoot in 4K, and at 2x zoom the results are quite good, with plenty of detail. The ultra-wide angle cam can only shoot in up to 1080p at 30 FPS, and these are decent, but clearly inferior to what you can get from the other two cameras. As far as stabilization goes, well, 4K video doesn't have any, so unless you're using a tripod, you'll end up with jittery footage. In 1080p, you have always-on electronic stabilization. This works well, but it also means that videos in this resolution are a bit cropped.